Hi there guys, and welcome to another replay cast. This time featuring the Lowe, being driven for us by Yoser95. And yeah, well, he sent me this replay, and what he does isn't exactly... He doesn't actually have to do that much. That takes a lot of effort. And all he ends up really doing is getting into a position where you can really use the armor of this effectively. And that's not that difficult these days with this tank. Since it got buffed, this thing has become incredibly strong, and I'm gonna go over why. It does still have a couple of weak spots that some tanks can make use of, but this thing is really strong now. So, starting off with the front of the hull, the upper plate got buffed to... it's over 150 now. I can't remember exactly what it was before. I think it was 120. And they actually made it a little bit more angled with a new model. It was actually quite a bit less angled beforehand. Then you've got this little flat bar here. That's 200 millimeters. And then the lower plate here is, I think it's about 150. And then you've got the whole side is 100 millimeters. 100 millimeters along here, 100 millimeters behind the tracks. And the rear is, I believe, 80 millimeters still. Then you've got the turret, and well, you've got over 120 millimeters in raw thickness on the main parts of the turret. The gun mantlet, a bit more, and then you've got this kind of long bit of the gun mantlet here that's got at least 200 millimeters of raw thickness. But there are some parts that can be penned with high pen guns, just straight through the gun mantlet. I think if you have 230, 240, you can pen like here. Well, it's a small target, but you can get through. But this is the kind of position where this tank really shines. I will just switch back to free cam mode for the moment and switch back to this. He was, against those targets at least, able to hide his lower plate completely. Note here a bounce off of there, and also it was slightly angled up. There are tanks that can still punch right through the front of the hull, mostly tier 9s and 10s, but still, it's a lot more effective now. Obviously from the side, the turret's kind of cheese really, but still, it's a lot stronger frontally. Note that there's a bounce up here, and there are actually weak spots just immediately to either side of the gun mantlet, but those are very, very small, and you can really only hit them up close, at least reliably. But once again, you can see he's pulling back to a position where he can hide his lower plate, or at least mostly hide his lower plate. Like, pulling back like this, you can see he's mostly hull down now. And so they've not really got much to shoot at here, this 112, the T-44-100 and the Panther 88. As for how the match is going, it's a bit of a weird one this. We're seeing passive play at work from both teams here. This team have a huge numbers advantage on this side. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tanks on this side. 9 tanks. Well, the enemy team would have had a numbers advantage if this Lowe here and if this Lowe here had both been on this side to help push around. Because now these guys are going to get slowly cut down by 1, 2, 3, 4 heavy tanks on this side, and well, that AMX 5100 is going to do something eventually, just not for a while. Meanwhile, friendly mediums have got basically the whole rest of the enemy team to deal with. Meanwhile, this Lowe has been out of position the whole match, and his buddy's way up there for some reason. Not exactly the most useful flank for them, but still. But you can see, just sitting in this position where he can hide his lower plate, having none of the enemy TDs up here to counter it, and make it awkward for him, he's pretty much just able to just shrug off shots. Now there, the Panther 88 does pen him. I do believe it's lower plate. It does not show, and in fact, in fixed cam mode, Yoser does actually, I can see Yoser actually scanning around his tank just to see where exactly the Panther penned, but it was the lower plate. There are actually the occasional problems where pen markers don't appear. That was the upper plate that the Panther hit just then. But, you know, Panther 88's playing chicken with a Lowe at short range. This is not what he wants to be doing. The Lowe shells have a really good shell velocity, and it's a decently accurate gun as far as heavy tank guns go. The alpha damage isn't spectacular, it's only 320, but it's accurate enough to put shots in where you don't really have to aim that much, especially at this kind of range. And yeah, hitting the lower plate of a KV-4 from that range is no problem at all. That Panther 88 has been harassing Yoser for most of the match and putting in some effective fire. Mostly bounces, but a couple of pens here and there. Meanwhile, this Carnarvon's not exactly been having a fun match. He's pretty much completely stock. And the 5100 has finally got himself into action and missing most of his shots on that IS-3, while Yoser just pops around the corner, boop, and then bounces a shot from the Panther 88. Yeah, as you can see, that kind of range, you don't really need to aim very much against targets that you've got enough pen for, like the front of an IS-3. Meanwhile, this Panther 88 is still trying to poke that little ridgeline there. Meanwhile, the rest of the team have succeeded in cleaning up the enemy tanks up here through the efforts of the mediums and the tank destroyers. Only 4 tanks have been lost on Yoser's team so far, while the enemy have lost 2/3 of theirs, and all the rest of them are in this corner. As you can see, the Patriot and the T-32 are here, KV-4 and IS-3 are here, and Panther 88 is here. The T-32 has been the only one to go back up the hill there to try and stop anything that comes from their base. And meanwhile, Yoser, trying to take another shot at the IS-3 to finish him off, ends up hitting the black hole side armor instead. Meanwhile, the KV-4 is tracked and just doesn't... Oh, well, it is a Russian tank after all. Gotta expect random bounces like that. Meanwhile, this Panther 88 is aiming at someone else, but Yoser's just gonna take the time to track him, but doesn't have any assistance damage done to it, mainly because the Panther still had the repair kit and it was off of cooldown. Patriot here can't really do anything. From this angle, he's never going to hit the lower plate of the Lowe, so he's going to get, well, Yoser's a bit unlucky there that he got the tracking shot instead of the lower plate, but there's really not much the Patriot can do here. And now Yost can just push over, remain fairly hull down, and just put a shot into the upper plate, which his tank has more than enough pen for, even with standard ammo. And now it's just the Panther 88, and that's pretty much it. The Udez somehow manages to fuck that up and drown himself, but, you know, it's random battles. These things are to be expected. So Yoser playing in the buffed Lowe there, gets his ace tanker, gets 4,109 damage, for 2 kills and 1,422 base XP. And the reason for that, well, not only did he do all the damage and get 2 kills, he also spotted 3 enemy tanks somehow, and did 270 assistance, and blocked 3,160 damage. I can't remember who exactly got the steel wall medal, but it should have been Yoser, because note the lack of one here. In the... I think he was a little bit robbed there. So a bit weird, but nevertheless, that's a pretty nice amount of damage blocked. It does show you that Lowe is quite a capable tank now. And it's not one to be underestimated. It is still really slow, it's still pretty sluggish, but get it into a position where its lower plate is hidden, and you'll have good games. You'll have very good games. Especially if the enemy team are being incredibly passive and not making use of any of their numbers or mobility or anything. Because the enemy team in this case certainly did. Let me switch back to this. So for example, you had the 112 the T-44 and the Panther 88 all over here, and then you had the IS-3 just chilling like here. What did Yoser's team have? Well, they had Yoser in his low DPM but heavy armor Lowe. They had a stock Carnarvon, fairly stock. In fact, that is a stock KV4. They had an IS-3 kind of chilling over here. So if he fires, he's off. He's on reload for another 10 seconds. They had a Tiger 2 who had the stock turret, so he had no armor, at least that was any use. And he had one of the 105mm guns. I couldn't really tell which one. And then the enemy team also had a Patriot, a T-32. They could have just pushed round here and then got themselves into position here, and like they could have sat here and got themselves here. They could have even gotten all the way up to this rock, and then they would have been they would have won pretty much. They would have taken this side, and then they could have swept all the way around from here, taking out the UDES and the Jagdtiger, and then gone up towards the mediums. But no, they kind of just sat. None of them wanted to poke against the Lowe or literally anything else. I think it was pretty much just Yoser and the IS-3 that were the main problems for the enemy team on this side, which you know is and also like they had the 5100 like here. Sure that can do a lot of damage, but once he's on reload, that's 45 seconds. That's a long time. They had plenty of time. If that 5100 had fired his whole clip, then they would have been able to push round and they would have won, because they had the advantage in terms of DPM. They had a good selection of armor. Like, even without the two Lowes that for some reason decided they wanted to be medium tanks and went up here, then they could have won. But you know, they were scared of a hull down Lowe, which has low DPM and can be outflanked incredibly easily. They had a stock KV4, a stock Carnarvon, a fairly stock Tiger 2, a 5100 who was chilling pretty far out the way, and an IS-3. That's it. They could have won. But they didn't. They just threw it away. Anyway, guys, I'm thinking I'll do probably like proper like analyses of matches rather than these kind of simple replay casts at some point. If you guys have one that you want me to properly go over and see if I can properly spot mistakes like I did just then, and show what could have been done to prevent them, not necessarily your own ones, but maybe those of your team or the enemy team, and then just let me know in the comments below. I'd actually be quite happy to do those, and yeah, I think it would actually be pretty interesting to see how a match kind of develops and what situations could have either been avoided or what situations could have gone a completely different way. Like, for example, in this one where I just told you basically how the enemy team could have just completely won this flank. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you on the next one.